is our friend of the show, Adam Friedman, rankings director, among other things, for Rivals. Adam, always great to chat. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Of course, busy time here for Syracuse on the recruiting trail, official visit month, and going to be really kicking off this weekend. Had some guys on campus last weekend, but this weekend's when the fun begins, and certainly through the end of the month here, it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, we were kind of new to this last year because I know June has been a big football recruiting month for a long time now, but until last year when Fran did it here for the first time, it just did not have the sizzle around here. It was not something we really focused on. Tell our listeners, how big is the month of June when it comes to recruiting on an annual basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. This is when everybody in the country is taking their official visits. You're talking weekends. You're talking midweek official visits. Most of the kids around the country are out of school or very close to getting out of school for the year, and they're trying to figure out their commitment this month. We're really in commitment season right now. We see most of the commitments happen between now and that first or second weekend of July. More commitments come during this time period than in December during the early signing period. So we're in the thick of it right now, and official visits are where these kids get most of their information and figure out what schools like them, what schools they don't like them as much. And of course, these NIL deals and revenue share deals are getting figured out kind of at the same time, and they can't sign it ahead of time, but they figure out who's doing what, and we get it all locked in.
There's obviously you had an NIL and the rev share that's likely coming here in a few weeks once it finally gets all sorted out and announced. It certainly adds a whole nother layer to things right now. And obviously Syracuse is been involved in football recruiting for a long time. Of course you are when you have a football program, but the seas in which Fran is swimming here are kind of new to us. We've been hearing a lot recently about this five-star number one rideout, Calvin Russell. What can you tell us about him, and is this a guy you think, Adam, that Syracuse legitimately has a chance at?
Yeah, Calvin's a really interesting prospect. A Rivals 250 receiver for us out of Florida. Incredible athlete, right? About 6'4", 6'5". He's a really good basketball player also. He projects as a receiver, but spent most of last season playing quarterback. And, of course, his coach is, I believe, Teddy Bridgewater, who we all know from the NFL. And, Calvin isn't totally an open book when it comes to his recruitment, but, his teams around the country are really interested in him. We're looking at mostly the in-state schools for him. Florida, Florida State, Miami have been doing a really good job with him, but Syracuse has hit a lot of the right buttons, and they've got him on campus a few times already this year. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that Syracuse is the favorite to land him, but they are in the thick of it, and it's going to be a battle for him all the way through the end of his recruitment, not just this weekend, or not just this month when he announces, whatever visits he's taking, but all the way through National Signing Day.
Yeah, I believed he said he's going to announce his verbal commitment on July 5th, but we all know that does not end the process of how these things go. I'm curious, whether it is Russell or it ends up being somebody else this year, next year, or wherever, what would it mean for Fran, for the Syracuse football program, on like the national recruiting scene if they were able to grab a five-star? Because I think, you go back to 2000, I think they've had two ever, and it's been 25 years since they've had a five-star. What would that tell you about Syracuse, and what would that tell major recruits if one came here?
Well, if there was ever a five-star, this year to really, say that, hey, Syracuse is the team for me, it would signal to not just players around the country, but certainly in Syracuse's backyard that it's cool to go to Syracuse. Coach Fran Brown has done an amazing job bringing talent to upstate New York there since he's arrived, whether it's on the recruiting trail at a high school or via the transfer portal. He's done a fantastic job, and obviously last season was a great year for Syracuse on the field, and, that's going to let recruits know that, hey, this isn't somewhere where I need to go to transfer to. This is somewhere I can go from day one, get developed, and also win at the same time.
Yeah, 10 wins, obviously, in the first season. Then, Fran, obviously, and we're anticipating, we're still waiting on this from the legal side of things. We're anticipating a 105 scholarship limit, roster limit thing coming sooner than later. Certainly for Syracuse's sake, it better with the amount of signees that Fran has coming in this season and just the way the math is working it out. What does it show you how Fran has done volume-wise here since he showed up where, in the olden days, pre-portal, 25-man limit, you couldn't flip a roster this quick. He's added so many people here in the last year and a half. It's kind of head-spinning at this point.
Yeah, it's outstanding the work that he's been able to do, just flipping this roster year over year. And now, a few years in, it looks like he's still in that mode where he's quickly finding players that he likes, that he thinks can contribute, and then finding other homes for these players who may not be able to contribute right away. Right, 49 players, I think, or close to 50 players in the 2025 high school and transfer portal class, and it's going to continue on this trend, I think, until Fran gets this roster where he wants it to be, and he's going to continue to roll on the high school level, finding players who bring speed at the skill positions and then size and physicality closer to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, big guys beat up small guys is one of his favorite things to say, and you can see that in the volume and size of the offensive linemen that he's brought in here in the last year. We got Adam Friedman, Rivals.com rankings director, with us, and Adam, I mentioned Calvin Russell as a major receiving talent. There's a guy much closer to here, a 4-star by the name of Messiah Hampton from Rochester. And at least at the moment, it looks like it's down to Cuse, Penn State, Miami, and Oregon. That's a heady group to be in, right, for Syracuse. I don't know about you, Adam. It almost feels more important to get a guy like this. If you can get, without question, the best player in your own state that's about an hour from here, that feels like it would be a major get if you can pull it if you're Syracuse.
It's huge, yeah, right. You need to keep your best players at home, and that's not just true for Syracuse. That's true for every college football program across the country. Messiah is one of the best players the Syracuse area has seen in years, right? I mean, this guy's 6'1". He's been absolutely dominating the 7-on-7 circuit. He did a great job last season on the field. He's got really good testing measurables. We're all very excited about how he projects. He's a top 100 prospect in the nation. Number one player in the state of New York. It would be a really big deal for Syracuse to keep him at home, keep him from going to somewhere like Oregon, where it seems like the Ducks may be trending. He was just at Miami, and it still seems like Oregon may hold that lead, but Syracuse is right there. I would imagine right ahead of Miami at this point in the process. We'll see if that continues, as we get closer to his commitment. And again, even if he commits in July, his recruitment is not going to be over until National Signing Day in December. And then who knows what happens after that. There's the transfer portal. Players are moving around all the time. Fran Brown has been just developing really good relationships with these players, even if they're not signing with Syracuse. And that could pay dividends down the road as well. Yeah,
we certainly have seen it paying dividends in the portal the last couple of years with everyone starting, obviously, with Kyle McCord last year and everyone else that has followed beyond that. For those, the connection to Oregon from here is that Ross Douglas, Syracuse's receiver coach last year, that's where his gig is now. It's one thing if you lose a guy to Oregon, they basically have unlimited funds. That's okay, what are you going to do about it? Syracuse going against Penn State, too, is involved in this, and in general. In years past, we know the Orange recruit against Rutgers and BC and Pitt a lot. What does it mean if Syracuse is now legit tangling with Penn State for players? It used to be in the past, if Penn State came in, that was game over. For Syracuse to be in it against Penn State feels significant for Northeast recruits.
Right, you're playing against one of the best teams in college football. Right, this is a step up in class, and when you're against these big guys, these blue blood programs, it means more to your program. Right, it signals to players around the country that hey, this is a legitimate program that's actually a contender. It signals to the media that hey, this team is actually to be taken seriously, and it signals to parents really that hey, this is a team that is actually going to take the development of my son seriously and look at his future and work to make sure that he's going to be able to make a living at this sport beyond just the college game.
Speaking of making a living, obviously NIL and that has become significant here in the last couple of years. And, you get to the portal season, right? You hear all these crazy numbers being thrown around, and you certainly hear that at a high school with the quarterbacks at least. How big is the money factor at the moment when it comes to high school recruiting for football?
It's huge, right? I mean, there are teams out there that are prioritizing high school players, but there are other teams that are focused more on recruiting out of the transfer portal. But there's still this incredible influx of money into college football recruiting in general. And it's going to vary team by team where they're going to actually put their dollars. But, there's money to be had, right, for a quality high school football player, a guy who's going to be able to project, but there's also money to be had for players who need a year or two to develop, right? You hear, Kirby Smart talking about, hey, we're going to need $20,000 to keep a kid committed after they announce, right? That's not the waters that Syracuse is playing in right now, but they're going to make sure that they take care of these players from the high school level, and then also at the, in the transfer portal, they're going to take care of these players. And Fran has done an incredible job kind of energizing the Syracuse alumni base, and the collective there is doing what they need to be doing. And so, I would expect Syracuse to continue to trend upward in this area as the framework comes more into focus, right? With the House case coming, the settlement coming here hopefully pretty soon. I think everybody hopes it comes sooner rather than later. But July 1st is when that revenue share kicks in. So we're going to see what happens after that.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get an answer on that. One of these days the judge will get around to Judge Wilkin will get around to the final ruling of that. We got Adam Friedman from Rivals with us. Adam, we mentioned Russell, we mentioned Hampton. Are there any other major high-profile recruiting battles involving Syracuse that you have your eyes on right now?
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on Karan Maycock. He's supposed to be on campus this weekend. He's from the South. He's entertaining Florida State, Florida, Alabama. All those schools are on him. I would keep an eye on him. Derek Zammit is a quarterback who's committed to Washington. He doesn't have a visit scheduled, I don't believe, to Syracuse, but keep an eye on him down the road. There's a quarterback out of Philadelphia at St. Joe's Prep there, Charlie Falk, who I would keep an eye on as well. I believe he was Pennsylvania State Player of the Year last year, so a really good player. Obviously a connection there. That was where Kyle McCord was the quarterback at St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia. Those would be the big ones I'm keeping an eye on. Jamal Rule was is a running back from Charlotte who took a visit to Syracuse last weekend, and he's going to be looking at Virginia Tech and Nebraska as well. Keep an eye on those guys. But those are the big name ones that come to mind about Syracuse right now. There are other ones. Really like the class, though, that Syracuse is starting to put together and how all these players really complement the roster that's already in place.
Yeah, last thought here. They got, I believe it's 15 guys currently verbal. There was a decommit that ended up going to hang out with Andrew Luck and crew at Stanford the other day. But where Syracuse is at, 15 guys. I think they got 2 4-star guys. Are they ahead of the game right now? Is this about where you need to be? Where is Syracuse in relation to other schools at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, they're 15 players right now. They currently have a top 20 recruiting class. The way that things are trending right now, I would expect them to be more in that 30 to 40, maybe 50 range, somewhere in there. It kind of depends on how everything shakes out. We're seeing highly rated recruits really spread out now more than ever, and that's obviously because of NIL and the revenue share. Team players aren't necessarily gravitating towards a certain set of schools like they were in the past. So we're going to see the rankings a little bit more bunched up than we have in the past once you get outside the top 5 or 7. And I think Syracuse has a chance to really take advantage of that in this year and really, in the future. So look for a class from Syracuse in that 30 to 50 range if everything continues to progress in this way. But you never know, whatever happens with Messiah Hampton, Calvin Russell, all those guys that we mentioned, Syracuse could find themselves more, staying in this top 20 range. But they've got this class right now of 15 with an average stars per commit of just over 3. We're looking at a class probably in that 30 to 50 range.
All right. Exciting times around here, Adam. Exciting times around here for sure. All right. Thanks as always for hopping on, Adam, and we'll touch base again soon. All right.
Sounds good, Brian. Thank you very much.
All right, there he is, Adam Friedman, rankings director for Rivals.com. It's fun to talk about the rankings and the recruits when you talk about the top of the rankings. This recruiting thing. Who knew all these years the fun we could have been having? Who knew? I get it now. Like, it used to be like, what is all this? Well, it's just names and names, and now it's like, ooh, names, Fran. Yeah, we like it. We'll take a break here in this hour, brought to you by William Mattar. Hurt in a car, call William Mattar. You can call us when we come back. 315-437-7644. Back after this. Phone lines open and available rest of the way on a Thursday. It's Q Sports Talk. It is ESPN Radio.